The Tyrese we got on AMC's The Walking Dead wasn't bad. He was compassionate, calm, even spiritual at times. But here's the thing, that wasn't Tyrese. Not really. In Robert Kirkman's The Walking Dead comics, Tyrese was a monster of emotion. Powerful, broken, and brutal when he needed to be. He was Rick's right-hand man before Daryl even existed, his best friend, his moral anchor, and sometimes his greatest rival. But when AMC brought him to life, they stripped away almost everything that made Tyrese who he was. His rage, his tragedy, his leadership. They turned one of the most dynamic characters in the comics into someone who almost was unrecognizable. So today we're diving into the Tyrese we never saw in The Walking Dead, the version that swung harder, fell deeper, and defined some of the comic's darkest moments. Because once you see how powerful his story really was, you'll never look at the TV version the same way again. So let's rewind for a second. In AMC's The Walking Dead, Tyrese was introduced midway through season 3, already world-weary, cautious, and hesitant to kill. He was a man who wanted to hold on to his humanity in a world designed to destroy it. And for a while, that worked. He was compassionate, protective, and grounded. His connection with characters like Sasha, Carol, and even Judith gave him real heart. But it also meant he existed mostly as a moral contrast, a good man in a bad world. Now, if that's the Tyrese you know, buckle up, because in Robert Kirkman's comics, Tyrese was an entirely different beast. Comic Tyrese was raw power and pain. A former NFL linebacker turned into a survivor, a single father trying to protect his daughter Julie, and a man who became Rick's closest ally and sometimes his biggest threat. While AMC's version was defined by restraint, the comics Tyrese was defined by rage, the kind that came from loss, guilt, and love all tangled together. The difference between them isn't just personality though, it's purpose. The comic Tyrese moved the story forward. The TV Tyrese, he just kind of floated through it. And here's the thing about that, AMC didn't just change Tyrese, they dismantled him. The Tyrese in Kirkman's comics was a pillar. He wasn't just another survivor, he was the emotional backbone of Rick's group. When Rick lost control, Tyrese was there to keep him grounded. When the group questioned Rick's morality, Tyrese was the one man who could look him dead in the eye and say, "You're wrong." On TV, that presence barely existed. Tyrese wasn't Rick's equal. He was a supporting voice in the background, a man defined more by guilt than leadership. AMC didn't just soften him either. They split him apart and handed his pieces to other characters. His rage and brutality, that went to Shane and then later Daryl. His father figure depth was passed right to Morgan. His leadership under pressure was given single-handedly to Glenn and eventually Abraham. What we were left with was a quiet, broken man who embodied mercy more than survival. And while that version meant something, it wasn't the Tyrese who shaped the early years of The Walking Dead's moral world. In the comics, Tyrese defined the tone of the apocalypse. He made you feel the cost of staying human. On TV, he became an example of what happens when you cling to humanity for too long. And that's the tragedy here. Not that the show made him weaker, but it made him definitely more forgettable. Because the Tyrese we never saw was fire and fury, the man Rick trusted to make the hard calls, not the man who froze when it mattered most. In the comics, Tyrese enters immediately, practically right after Rick finds the Atlanta camp. He's not just another face, he becomes Rick's second in command. His presence shapes every early decision the group ever made. When Rick loses Shane, it's Tyrese who steps in. On TV, he doesn't even appear till way later, already tired, already defeated. By then, Rick already had Daryl, Glenn, and Michonne. His emotional role was filled. And instead of a partner, Tyrese became a passenger. The comic Tyrese helped build Rick's world. The TV Tyrese just walked into it. One of the most gut-wrenching parts of the comics, and one that the show completely erased, was Tyrese's daughter Julie. Julie and her boyfriend Chris make a suicide pact that goes horribly wrong. She dies, but he doesn't. And in that moment of pure heartbreak, Tyrese beats Chris to death with his bare hands. That single scene defines comic Tyrese. It's the birth of his guilt, his rage, his inability to control his emotions. Everything he does afterwards, every decision, every swing of that hammer comes from that loss. AMC replaced that with Karen, a woman he barely knew, and it just didn't land the same way. Karen's death was sad, for sure, but Julie's death was devastating. It's the moment that turned a man into a storm, and without it, AMC's Tyrese never had a reason to burn. And then there's Carol. In the comics, Carol and Tyrese's relationship is messy, tragic, and painfully human. She's fragile, he's loyal until he isn't, and when Tyrese cheats on her with Michonne, Carol completely unravels. It's one of the darkest, most emotional storylines in early The Walking Dead. And on TV, that dynamic got flipped completely. I mean, Carol didn't die in the show. Carol became one of the most important characters in the show. She became a cold survivor, and Tyrese became the emotional one. So it's like night and day, totally different. Anyway, in the TV show, instead of being the man who pushed Carol to her breaking point, he became the man she had to emotionally carry. It's definitely not a bad change, because there were some really good moments that came from the adaptation, but it stripped away one of the most haunting psychological arcs that the comics ever pulled off. Because Tyrese in the comics, he wasn't perfect. He was human, and that's exactly what made him unforgettable. In the comics, Tyrese's prison story is pure chaos. He executes prisoners after discovering their crimes. He's Rick's muscle, his enforcer, his conscience, all at once. But when the governor attacks, it all ends in one of the most brutal deaths in the series. Tyrese is captured, beaten, and beheaded in front of Rick and Michonne in the same exact death as Herschel's. And as you guys know, like I just said, AMC completely replaced that. They gave a lot of that emotional weight that Tyrese had to Herschel, and they gave Herschel Tyrese's death. There was a definite parallel there. Anyway, in the comics, his death scene was one of the most shocking moments. I'll never forget turning to that page. That was just a mind blow of a scene. But in the show, Tyrese's own death became quiet, slow, and dreamlike with those hallucinations. Basically, he gets bit in the most avoidable way imaginable, and then spends his final moments hallucinating the people he's lost. It's poetic, sure, but it's not Tyrese. The comic version went out fighting. The show version went out forgiving, and a very dumb way, too. In the comics, Tyrese and Rick's relationship is the story. They're brothers, not by blood, but by battle, just like him and Daryl in the show. They fight, they disagree, but they always come back to each other. It's messy, masculine, and deeply emotional. When Rick kills someone he shouldn't have, Tyrese calls him out. When Tyrese loses control, Rick drags him back. On TV, that bond just never, ever existed. They share maybe a handful of scenes together, but there's no trust, no history, and no real connection. That absence might be the biggest difference of all, because Rick and Tyrese together represented balance, strength, and reason, fury and mercy. Without that bond, the show just lost one of the comics' most important emotional engines, and I know they did give it to other people, but I'm talking in terms of just Tyrese alone here. Across every one of these changes, from his intro to his death, AMC didn't just rewrite Tyrese. They redefined what kind of man he was allowed to be. Now look, I get it. AMC's version of The Walking Dead already had its fair share of dominant male leads. Rick, Shane, Daryl, Abraham, and even the governor. It's easy to imagine the writers saying that they don't need another alpha male in terms of the story. And yeah, I do understand the instinct to make Tyrese the gentler soul. Someone who shows mercy in a show built on violence. A man who still believes in forgiveness when everyone else has lost their faith in it. But here's the problem. That mercy came at the cost of his depth. Comic Tyrese wasn't just another tough guy. He was layered, strong but emotional, fierce but broken. He felt everything. He made terrible choices and paid for them. And that's what made him human, as I already mentioned. That's what made him tragic. AMC stripped all of that down to one note: guilt. Every time Tyrese could have gone darker, when Karen died, when Lizzie killed Mika, even when he faced the governor's aftermath, the show just backed off. It was like they were afraid to break him. And that's the thing, in The Walking Dead, breaking is where the truth always lived. It's where the best elements of the story lived. Comic Tyrese broke over and over again, and that's why his story hit harder. So while I respect AMC's version for trying something different, let's be real, the Tyrese we got wasn't wasn't a reinvention, it was a straight up reduction. The Tyrese we saw on TV was a good man, maybe even too good for the world he lived in, but the Tyrese we never saw, he was unforgettable. One version died quietly in peace, the other went out screaming and made us feel every second of it. And maybe that's the real difference between the two. The show gave us closure, the comics gave us consequence. Special shout out to our brand new members. Seriously, it helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos, but if you'd like to become a brand new member, the link to do so is right after the subscribe button. It will change to a join button. You could also find it linked in the description right under the like button.